Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Johnson. I am with Train 51 Consulting Agency. I'm so excited for today. This is our first launch of a LinkedIn Live series called Back to Basic Practice Management. As I always say, I think it's good to go back to basics and figure out what are some of the things that we've either sort of let things put on the wayside or we need to review again and just think about simple solutions to get our practices working efficiently. I'm also excited today and thrilled to have Crystal Oliver Hines in our first kickoff topic, insurance coverage. And so I'm glad that she participated with me today in our conversation, and we will have so much information about the protection that you need for your practice, whether you're starting new or you're an existing practice. Before I do that, let me introduce to you Crystal Oliver Hines is a highly accomplished and dedicated professional in the field of insurance, specializing in property and casualty coverage. With an extensive career spanning over 2 decades, Crystal has established herself as a trusted expert in the insurance industry, renowned for her in depth knowledge and unwavering commitment to her clients. She is the proud owner of a thriving small business insurance agency called Marvel Agency. Crystal has consistently demonstrated her passion for assisting entrepreneurs and small business owners in protecting their assets and mitigating risk. Her firm grasp on intricacies of property and casualty insurance allows her to navigate complex policies, ensuring comprehensive coverage tailored to the unique needs of each client. I bring to you Crystal Oliver Hines. Hi,
Good morning.
Crystal.
Good
How are
morning.
you?
Hi, I'm
Good
good. How are
morning.
you?
Thank you for joining us today. And, I am excited to have you here. And we're talking about all things insurance coverage protection. And let's run through some of the things that, as an independent physician practice, whether we're starting out new or existing, and some of the tips that you may be able to help us and guide, how do we approach insurance coverage protection and how do we review that and how do we when is a good time for all those things. So before we move forward, is there anything you would like to let us know and add on with my introduction, or can we go ahead and dive in?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this, to share like some really good tips about what type of insurance coverage you need to get a practice started, or even if you're in an ongoing practice, what things you may want to look at in your existing insurance coverage. So, with that being said, I am ready to jump in.
Excellent. All right, so let's dive right in.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm asked at times, especially with a brand new practice, they're definitely setting up everything that they need, right? Administratively, getting their space ready to open their doors, and so insurance coverage as a new practice. Like, when do you consider that in your journey of preparing for your new practice to open their doors and start seeing clients? I'm sorry, patients.
So, insurance coverage is right up there at the top of one of the things that you want to get taken care of before your doors open. It's imperative at the moment a customer, client, patient walks through your doors that you are adequately covered for any possibility of a risk that may happen. So, day one, coverage should already be in effect. And we can go over the types of coverages that any practice should have just to get started, what they would need right away coming out of the gate.
So let's go ahead with that. What are that list? What is that, important coverage that they should prioritize, or, something that is on their checklist to say, this is what I need first, second, third, fourth. Let's dive into that list.
Okay, so fundamentally, I would suggest that very first, there's four coverages that I'm going to suggest. It's going to be general liability, professional liability, workers' comp, and cyber coverage for a data breach. Within the general liability, that is going to protect you and your partners in your practice against third party property or bodily injury So third party property damage, third party bodily injury. And a third party would be anybody visiting the practice other than the people who work there or, do the work at the practice. So a client or patient comes in, slips and falls, burns themselves in the water cooler, anything like that, your general liability coverage would be right up front for you for that. Another very, very, very important coverage is the professional liability, but in the case of a doctor's office, it'll be termed as malpractice. So anytime you're sitting down with a client, a patient, making recommendations about their diagnosis, what medicines to take, what foods they should eat, how they should take care of themselves in the duration of an illness or to avoid an illness, you would need coverage to protect you from your acts and the things that you say and the things that you suggest. So that's a very, very important coverage to have. And anybody practicing in medicine, doctor's office, physician's office, even a large hospital, any practicing doctor would have malpractice coverage or professional liability. Another very, very important coverage is workers' compensation. So if you have desk people, receptionists, or medical assistants that escort your patients to the back and do their height and their weight. Anybody who's working in the office should be covered for their own bodily injury. If they get hurt in the scope of work, workers' compensation covers them if they need to have time off, if they need to visit the hospital, or if they incur an illness while in the scope of work. Workers' compensation is right there out in front to take care of that. Another very important coverage that can be missed a lot is cyber liability. So cyber liability is going to protect you from data breaches. So anytime that you hold patient's information, their very personal, specific information to that patient, client, or otherwise, anytime that we are a holder of that information needs to be protected, because if it gets breached on our watch through our system, that could open us up to huge liabilities. So those four coverages in particular are what you're going to need to get any practice or business started. Now, I did not focus in a little bit on one other specific coverage that you may be able to get bundled with your general liability. So when you bundle your general liability with another singular coverage like property, which I'm about to dive into right now, you can get that under what's called a business owner's policy, or widely known as a BOP. So anytime that there's scanning machines, printers, faxes, computers, anything that you have in the office that is property of the business should be covered for damage. And you can also get that alongside of your general liability. So those things will get you started, get you covered right away. We always say the moment that you sit in front of a patient, customer, client, you need to be covered. Anytime there's an exchange of information, you should be covered. So those are the things that you would need to get started.
Wow, that's a lot of information that you've given to us, but it sounds like those are the key ingredients that we need to have before our doors are open. And definitely on the cybersecurity, there's a whole lot of things that are, lately, as we've heard, in the news or otherwise, that there have been some data breaches that have happened. So that is definitely important. So as your guidance in a new practice and in opening their doors, those are the key coverage that they should be looking at to make sure that once they open the doors for their patients, that they have that in place. That definitely makes sense. Now, what about if I am an existing practice? I've been practicing for years, and I've gotten, I have a coverage, I have something that's already in place. When is a good time to review our existing current policies? Like how often should we do that? Is that an annual? Is that something that needs to be reviewed frequently? And again, that frequency is kind of looking at the size and scope of our practice, and is that still a viable option based, or options based on what we've had in our initial coverage, right? So what's the steps, or what's the guidance that you would provide for existing practices?
So, an existing business, I would say coverage should be reviewed every 2 years outside of anything changing. Anytime something changes in your practice, whether you bring on an employee or, let go of an employee, add another doctor to the practice or add some more equipment to the practice, anything that's happening right away and changing should be communicated with your current insurance provider. In order to keep you covered the way that you should be and totally protected. Any changes the carrier needs to know about so they can factor those into your current policy. Outside of any changes, you want to make sure that you're looking at the policy at least every 2 years, making sure that your coverage is adequate, talking it over with your broker. We always suggest that, well, what I was going to allude to is that a lot of times people will check their coverage and unfortunately when they want to pay less, or something has happened and they realize that they have not been covered correctly. But we suggest when you're looking over your coverage, you want to make sure that the coverage is adequate and going to cover you and your business the way it should be, from point A to point Z. Everything that you could think about going on in your business is covered. So once you do that and you sit down with your broker and go through every line item and realize and make for certain that all the coverage is there, then you can start talking about, bottom line, is there a way to switch? And you want to take that information, the newly proved that everything is adequate information, take all that new information and then speak with your broker about maybe finding a carrier that can shave some dollars off the bottom line. But we never suggest going for the price first because you could miss a really important coverage when doing that. So always check on a biannual basis that your property is covered correctly, that your payroll is up to par for your workers' compensation, that you're letting the carrier know that you have more incidences of more revenue at this point so that they can increase the amount of cyber liability coverage, and that your general liability is adequate for the volume that you're receiving in your office. And once those things are in check, then it's a good idea to talk with your broker, a licensed broker, about whether or not they can find a different policy for you that might save you some money, but only after you're ensured that all of your coverages are there and are intact and they're covering the business adequately.
Now, is that more closer to the renewal time in review, for practice managers, their lead
Yeah,
clinicians, to talk about what they
absolutely.
have in place or what they don't have in place, and look to see what kind of budget they're working with, and then potential cost savings once they come to the table in that discussion. Is that what you've experienced, or is that something that can you shed a little bit of light what this in your experience discussions with you and your clients?
Yes. So, of course, we always suggest when you're looking at the policy, whether it is to switch or increase coverages and things like that, unless there's immediate change, you definitely want to do these ahead of the renewal. I would suggest 90 days ahead of the renewal. 90 days ahead, you may not have your carrier's renewal proposal yet, but it's a good time to start reviewing and looking at the things that you may want to bring up with your broker. And 90 days gives a good cushion in case you want to also shop out. So we would always suggest go 90 days. It gives enough time to review what you have going on, anticipate what the current carrier will do, discuss any changes or things that you're concerned about with your broker, and possibility pursue new brokers or agents if you feel like that is necessary.
And you hit something when you mentioned in terms of, the discussion with the insurance broker. So, it's a relationship, right, in terms
Yeah.
of the broker and the practice and who they're trusting their insurance coverage or protection, if you will, or the person that they're working with, right?
Right.
So let's say, for example, that relationship, took a different turn, and when and if is it a good time to switch insurance agents, at what point and in their review, for example, like you said, it was a 90-day review and they're looking to switch, for example. So what would you suggest would be the best approach in doing that and planning for that, if you will? Like if it's something that had been sort of talked about, kind of it's been waiting in the wings but hasn't really been put pen to paper, but at that point there had been a desire, to switch to a different insurance agent. So what happens there?
So yeah, keeping with that 90-day mark, 90 days, within 90 days of the renewal, you want to start at that 90 days out mark. I will always suggest, a rule of thumb for me is to have the conversation with your current broker first. Let them know that you have some concerns, whether it be about coverage, whether it be about service, anything that's concerning you about your current policy. Have that conversation with them at least 90 days out. The other thing, if you are very set upon getting outside quotes from a different broker, one thing you will have to ask for is your loss runs. Your loss runs are going to be a report of your claim history with the insurers that you've been with, that you've spent time with that broker. Loss runs are going to be essential for moving on to another carrier because they're going to want to review those to make a determination about how they're going to rate your current policy or the new upcoming policy. So you have the conversation, you ask for loss runs, and then you evaluate the coverage that you have. You ask your current broker to give you either your policy declarations pages. These are words that are thrown around in the industry a lot, but all they are is the basically declaring of the coverage. It's going to list the name of your practice, the coverage that you have there, and the amount that you're covered for, and quite possibly the price that you're paying. When you get these documents along with your loss runs, you can sit in front of another broker and let them know that this is what I currently have and this is what I expect, no less. But if you can do better than this for a better price, or just better than this because that's what I need, or you have a better way of explaining the coverages that I may need, well, let's talk about it. But you would need those so that you're not missing any coverage, and the next broker knows how to quote you, he knows what you have existing, and that you're not leaving anything left on the table. So 90 days out will definitely be the mark, and definitely a conversation with the current broker just to express, what your concerns are, and then grabbing those loss runs and policy declaration pages.
Now you mentioned loss runs, and just for terminology, if you will. So where do we find our loss runs? If that's something that we need to gather information. Where do we get that? And then can we go over what loss runs again are? Again, it's because again,
Sure.
terminology, right? We all in each industry have their own terminology, and just to
Absolutely.
being familiar with what are we looking for, and the right questions to be asking, or the right information to gather, so that you can make that decision whether you're retaining your relationship with your current insurance broker, or as we talked about, switching to another insurance agent, so you can get the right information you're looking for.
Okay. So your loss runs are just going to be a detailed loss report of any claims that you've had with that current insurer. So if you've been with them for, let's say, 3 years in a row, the loss runs will run back from the inception of the policy to the current date, and it will detail any losses or claims experiences that have occurred during that policy period, 1, 2, and 3. So when a new company is looking at you and your business, they want to evaluate those loss runs just to get an idea of the things that have been going on in your business. Always, zero claims is always the best, but things do happen. So a carrier would need to be able to evaluate based on the loss run. So that's what those are. They're just basically a report of the losses over the terms that you were with that carrier in particular. Now, how do you get those? You can get them a few easy ways. One would be to reach out to your broker. Let them know that you want to review your loss runs, and they will order them from the carrier and then deliver them to you. A lot of people at times are reluctant to do that because that is a signal to their current broker that they may be shopping coverage outside. And because, like you said
Mhm.
earlier, it's a relationship business, sometimes people feel a bit awkward about that. So knowing that you could always reach out directly to the insurance carrier and ask them for your loss runs, and they will be delivered directly to you, is also an option for the insured.
Are there anything as far as particular add-ons that we didn't talk about, or is there anything that in your line of field between property and casualty insurance that we didn't discuss yet? I know we've discussed general liability, we've discussed professional liability, workman's comp, and cybersecurity. Is there anything happening currently in terms of trends or things that we should be looking out for in the foreseeable future? Just again, a review of what we have currently in our policy, or something to think about as a brand new practice. Again, what could that be that I will need aside from the important ones that you've mentioned? Is there anything else that would also, down the line help me to continue the protection that I need for my practice and my patients and my staff?
Sure. So as your practice grows, there may be, and you assume like a board of directors. The practice is growing and there's more people involved. There's things like EPLI, which is a term used in the industry, and that's employment practices liability. It just basically will cover you and the owners of the practice for any employment related issues. So that could be, somebody feels like they were unlawfully fired or let go, even all the way down to maybe a sexual harassment claim. Having that kind of coverage in place will protect you from there. Also, I did mention if you assume a board of directors for your practice as it grows, directors and officers liability coverage is something that's available to protect the board themselves if something disastrous happens in the practice, so that nobody in the board is sued individually. The directors and officers coverage would jump right out in front of them for that. Another thing is basically you just always want to be checking your insurance for gaps to make sure that it's growing alongside of your business. You could have started with just $10,000 in property coverage to cover the things inside of your office because you're renting. And then, within 5 years, you've purchased a building now and you have about $100,000 in business personal property. So we have two new things that we would need to have covered under our BOP, or, our business owners property coverage. So now we have a new building and we also have more property. So the main thing is always just checking to make sure that your insurance is aligned with what you have going on currently, because some policies will renew with incremental increases, but those incremental increases are not always enough to cover what's going on in the business. Also, the workers' compensation, as you bring on more employees and your payroll grows, you need to be able to communicate that with the carrier so that all of the employees are covered appropriately and nobody is left out of coverage.
So it sounds like as you grow, even in existing practices, because you start out with one and or three, or again depending on size and scope, and you expand, whether it be at the building or workforce, you want to make sure that your coverage it grows with you. In other words, is what I heard is that
Yeah.
you want to review that and make sure that if you're expanded and you were renting before, now you're in your own place, how is my entire practice covered, and how many people do I have now? In expansion, there's also the reverse, right? There's the downsizing, and there's also the exiting, for example. So now, how does that work if a partner leaves, or if you downsize? You're not expanding, you're actually kind of going down in square footage, or it's something entirely different. What does that look like in review? And where does that then line into currently, in the change that I have? So what do I consider then? Let's say you have all of the things that we discussed about, at the time, because you were, expanding, and then all of a sudden we're contracting, right? So in that, with general liability, for professional, workmen's, and cybersecurity. So what then is the, I'm contracting, I'm now, narrowing my scope, my practice. And so what does that look like? How do we help them with that?
So it works basically the same as growing. It works the same when we are contracting. So you basically will talk to your carrier, your broker, about the changes in the company, because insurance in itself is based on the classification of the business and either the sales or the volume that's going on in the business. So when the business is going down in revenue, that should be communicated to the insurance carrier so that the premium is in alignment with what the business is actually doing at that moment. The same with workers' compensation. If you have started the coverage with $150,000 payroll, and now your payroll is down to $90,000, well, that needs to be communicated with the carrier because you are paying for $150,000. So there's money that should be, that could be saved, put into a different direction if you communicate with the carrier that you're not actually paying that much in payroll. And the same with the property. If you don't have as much property as you started, communicate that with your carrier so that that amount of coverage goes down, and likely the premium will go down alongside of it. In the case of, a partner stepping away from the business, well, that's a big deal for your professional liability, because if you are paying for 2, 3, or 4 partners and now there's only 1 or 2, communicating that with the carrier could result in savings as well.
Well, Crystal, I have to say, this is very, very informative. You no doubt know the ins and outs of the insurance world, and you are the subject matter expert. And I appreciate you coming in today. I do want to make sure that it sounds like that, the central focus is your insurance broker being able to help you navigate, your coverage plans, and that, in continuing with that relationship, that's something that is going to evolve over time. But it sounds like that's the central focus as to what practices will need to do in terms of entering into an insurance coverage protection. Did I get that correctly?
You did. Absolutely. A licensed broker, yes, this is definitely a relationship-based business, but a licensed broker is very important to any business because, as we spoke about during this live, that businesses change and things change within your business, and you need to be able to keep abreast with that. But you also, as a business owner, want to be able to focus on your business. So having a person who's licensed and properly trained, who understands the ins and outs of insurance, who can move and grow with you along with your business and keep on top of the changes and make sure that the carrier is communicated to correctly so that you can, thrive in your practice. Our business is based on protecting our clients. So I would always suggest, although there's lots of ways to get insurance on your own, through electronic wheelhouses on the internet, I would always suggest at least talking with a broker so you could gain some baseline understanding of what you need, what you should get, and how you can get it. So yeah, always have a broker to talk to. A licensed broker is a professional. We spend years learning the craft. We have to do continuing education just like everybody else so that we stay abreast of the industry. So that's going to be a partner in insurance and help grow your business and help your business stay protected.
So how do we get in touch with you if we're interested in pursuing that? And what's the best way to reach you? Should we have any further questions, whether it's an existing policy we have or we want to get into a new policy? How do we contact you and your agency?
So we at Marvel Agency, we pride ourselves on, being there for the consumer, whether you're our customer or not. We do free policy reviews, and that is true. They are free. So if you have a broker elsewhere, but you're just a little bit concerned about your coverage and you want us to review it, we happily do that free of charge. We love to give the 2 green thumbs that you're covered correctly. But if you're not, we will let you know where your policy could be deficient and make some recommendations about how to go forward. And you can take that information to your current broker or carrier and implement those coverages or at least start the conversation. So that's something that we do, free of charge for anybody who's interested. We can be reached at, I'll drop my number. My direct line to me is 610-714-5281. That's direct to me. I take calls and text messages over the weekends. If someone has a question, I love to be able to jump in and help. You can reach me directly by email at Crystal, and that's CRYSTAL @marvelagents.com, VELAGENTS.com, or you can jump by our website and do an intake inquiry form at marvelagents.com. Those inquiries come directly to me, and I would love to reach out and answer any questions that anybody has regarding insurance, their current or prospective insurance.
Thank you again, Crystal. I will certainly repost that information after this live event. I want to thank everyone who participated in our live event today. I'm so thrilled about our launch with Train 51 in this live series. There's more to come. There's other subjects and topics that I think is relevant to, as what I call back to basics in practice management, whether you're a current practice or looking to open your own. These are some tips and information that we'd like to share to help you continue a viable independent practice as taking care of your patients. So Crystal, once again, thank you so much. We've learned a whole lot, and we will certainly send the information right back, and just for anyone who might want to reach with you. Well, have a great day, everyone. Thank you, and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.